Today we got some stories of people doing stuff in school that they really shouldn't be doing, if you know what I mean. I can't really elaborate, but you'll figure it out pretty soon. I just don't want YouTube to be big mad. So leave a like on the video to claim your free nothing, and let's just jump right into it. So we're going to call a subscriber who submitted the first story Audrey. So anyways, Audrey was a pretty good kid who stayed away from anything that kids, or really, arguably a lot of people shouldn't have at any time, but especially when you're a kid in high school, and especially when you're at school. So this thing specifically wasn't too bad. We're gonna call it a sucky stick, but that sounds so bad. I'm just gonna call it a fork. What it actually is one of the Juul vapes, but I don't want to say that word too often because YouTube will be big mad. So I'm just going to call it a fork, and you guys will know what I mean. Anyway, so one day, Audrey was on the bus, and she stayed away from all that, like, fork nonsense, right? She's like, all right, it's gonna screw up my lungs. People are just doing it to be cool, and then they get an addiction to nicotine. Like, I think I'm all set, bro. I think I'm chilling. I think I'll be all good without having a nicotine addiction by the age of, 18. Like, I'm chilling, right? So Audrey was a sophomore in high school, and this all happened one day while she was on the bus. So this girl that she kind of knew but didn't know super well decided to sit next to her, and I think they had a couple classes together, but it wasn't like they were close personal best friends or anything, right? So anyways, Audrey and her were sitting next to each other, and they had a little bit of conversation. This is the first time Audrey's actually seen her on the bus. I think the bus was taking, a different route this day, or maybe this girl was just starting to get on the bus. I don't totally know. But anyways, right, Audrey watches as after, a couple minutes or something, this girl takes out her fork and, rips her fork. It sounds weird, but you guys know what I mean. And Audrey kind of just didn't think much of it because it was very popular at the school. But because it was so popular, the school was really cracking down on it and basically saying, hey, punishment's going to be worse because it's we're seeing it's kind of spiral out of control, so we're going to really crack down on this stuff, right? So anyways, Audrey sees this, and, the friend looks at her and kind of looks up at Audrey and says, oh, do you want to try some? And unfortunately, right, Audrey would have never done this by herself, but peer pressure is a hard thing. I will say I've never been in a situation where I've declined something and I've had a positive reaction. Maybe some people are like, oh, come on, man. Look, trust me on this one. If you just say no to this stuff and you're not like, no, because it's going to destroy my lungs. Look, it will. But if you're with someone and they do it and they offer, just be like, nah, I'm good. Just keep it really nice, concise. It won't be an issue. I promise you. But anyways, Audrey did fall for the peer pressure. She's like, fine, whatever. How bad can it really be? First of all, she just starts coughing when she takes a rip of the fork, right? But it also was terrible, terrible timing because the bus had stopped and the bus driver was already kind of walking to the back to just check in on something. And the bus driver catches Audrey, right? And the bus driver has been informed that if anyone has it, to take a photo, submit it to the front office, whatever. So the bus driver is like, hey, wait right there. And Audrey's like, what? And the bus driver says, stretch out your hand. And Audrey obviously has the fork in her hand. And she's like, Bus driver's like, come on now. Stretch out your hand. Can't hide it. Audrey's like, Eventually she does. Bus driver takes it. Takes out, the bus driver takes out her phone. Takes a photo of it. Takes a photo of Audrey. And is like, all right, well, here you go. The bus driver was probably supposed to, keep the fork. But I guess the bus driver was really just going through the motions. And so Audrey for a second is like, what just happened? And her friend's like, oh, no, dude, that's not good. The one that was sitting next to her and gave her the fork. Audrey's like, what do you mean? And she's like, oh, man, they're going to report you to the front office. And Audrey started to freak out. She's like, no, that can't happen. My parents would be so mad. And the person's like, dude, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. I mean, she gave it back to you, so maybe she'll forget. I don't know. Sure enough, it was second period. Audrey had been in school for two classes at this point. She was already starting to freak out a little bit just because she was worried about, oh my God, what are my parents going to think? All this kind of stuff, right? Reasonable concerns. And sure enough, when she walked out of class, some kind of a teacher or faculty or whatever walked up and says, hey, is your name Audrey last name? And she's like, yes. And they're like, hey, can you just come to the front office real quick? Audrey immediately knew what this was about. So sure enough, she walks up to the front office. The administrator, principal perhaps, I don't know if the principal, like, dealt with these issues. Maybe she did. But maybe the principal or whoever dealt with the issues was sitting at the desk and said, hey, Audrey, can you sit down for a second? Audrey's like, okay. And yeah, the principal or whoever else, didn't want to drag it out, didn't want to be like too dramatic or anything, but basically said, hey, I mean, we got the photo from the bus driver. It's pretty standard procedure what we do here. We're going to ask, like, for first-time offenders like yourself, we're going to ask that you take a course at our school. Like, it's only going to be, like, 30 minutes, like, every day after school for, like, 2 weeks. And Audrey's like, ugh. And also, we're going to have to let your parents know. And Audrey would have taken a 30-minute, like, do not, like, suck on a fork course after school for, like, a year over, like, her parents knowing. So Audrey's like, is there any way we can get it so your parents, like, you don't tell my parents? And they're like, sorry, we got an obligation to do so. Yeah, so Audrey got in a lot of trouble. Her parents were not happy about it. Even as she explained, she just fell for peer pressure for one time. And yeah, she had to spend 30 minutes after school taking this, like, why you should not do this course, which she knew all the reasons why not to. It was the reason why she had not done it before. But yeah, and that punishment was not as bad as what her parents, her parents were definitely the ones who stepped in and really gave the actual punishment. We're going to call a subscriber, submit the story next, Oliver. Anyways, so Oliver was in class. And there was a kid next to him in class who was just sucking on his fork, right? He's taking massive rips of his fork. And what this kid would do is he would, like, because he had a hoodie, right? And he would, like, shove his head into the hoodie, take a rip of his fork, and then blow a massive cloud into his hoodie. So you'd see a little bit of stuff dissipate out of the bottom of his hoodie. But believe it or not, it actually was able to keep him out of trouble for quite a long time. This was until, of course, one fateful day. So Oliver was sitting next to this kid. He normally didn't sit next to this kid, but it's just kind of how the seats arranged themselves that day. He just happened to be right next to him, right? And sure enough, the kid is doing what he's normally doing. Takes out his, like, fork, like, goes into his hoodie, blows, like, a massive cloud or whatever, right? But this time, something went wrong, right? Something did not go right, because Oliver was sitting next to this kid. This kid goes under his hoodie or whatever, inhales, but he must have, like, inhaled, like, a little bit more than just, or, like, for some reason, he starts having a coughing fit. So it turns into a massive eyesore, because basically, the guy's having a coughing fit, and he's like, oh, and he, like, sticks his head out of the hoodie. All this, like, smoke and vapor comes out, right? He's very clearly holding the fork in his hand. Because he's, like, breaking down into a coughing fit, the teacher turns around. The entire class as well turns around and looks at this kid. And they're all just looking at him kind of flounder around, like, coughing. And, yeah, sure enough, the teacher walks over, takes the fork out of his hand, tells him he has to go to the front office, confiscates it, obviously. And, yeah, that kid had a pretty good streak going, but not for long. That was a pretty quick story, so we got another one. This one is actually pretty crazy, so you'll definitely want to stick around for this one. We're going to call a subscriber who submitted this story Oliver. Or, no, we're going to call him Nick. I called the last guy Oliver. So anyways, Nick was sitting with a group of guys at lunch. And Nick was a relatively new kid at the school, and this group of guys seemed pretty good. He was becoming pretty friendly with one of them, so he would just follow him to lunch, and wherever he sat, he would sit with his friends. However, these friends were definitely more, I don't want to say sketchy, but I am going to say sketchy. Take that as you want. Basically, these kids were more prone to, breaking the rules and probably just more or less doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. So, yeah, Nick was sitting with these kids, and one of them, not the one that he was friends with, but one of the friends of the friends, is like, hey, Nick. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yo, you definitely would want some of this, bro. And he takes out a flask. And in this flask is a certain liquid that is made from distilling potatoes that adults drink that make them do stupid things. And I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Just trying to keep around the word around the stuff so that YouTube doesn't get too big mad. But anyways, Nick was completely thrown off guard because, one, what's like a 16-year-old kid doing with a flask like this? And I know, all you guys in the comments are going to be like, I've done black tar. I can't say that. Anyways, though, Nick, obviously says, nah, I'm good. Thank you, though. And the kid's like, come on, man. You don't want some of this? And then Nick's friend is actually being cool. And Nick's friend looks at his friend and is like, dude, if he doesn't want it, don't pressure him. Not everyone has to be a mess up like you do, dude. And the guy, like, with the flask kind of looks over at him with this kind of look, this kind of little bit of a, kind of like that one of those type of looks or whatever. And so sure enough, they're just sitting there, and they're kind of passing around this flask with the stuff inside of it. And that's when one of the teachers notices. The teacher notices the flask being passed around. So when the teacher comes over, the teacher says that everybody who's sitting at this table needs to get up now, and they need to go to the front office with her. So everyone, including Nick. And Nick is like, oh, no, dude, I just got here. And so, yeah, they go up to the front office, and they all sit down. And the principal's like, okay, fess up, guys. And Nick kind of spoke up saying, I didn't do anything. I'm not supposed to be here. And I think, like, some of the kids there were like, oh, man, it's supposed to be all of us or none of us, right? So some of the kids gave him a dirty look, which bro just sat down. He doesn't know you guys. Like, maybe he shouldn't have, like, quickly jumped the gun and said, I didn't do anything, and just said that a little later on, or just made sure that he got that point across, but maybe shouldn't have jumped on it right away. But also, I don't blame him. I don't know. It's a little tough here. But anyways, right, yeah, so all the other kids are like, no, like, none of us did it. And the principal's like, really? None of you guys did it? When the teacher saw at least 1 to 2 of you do it? You're saying none of you guys did it? If none of you guys did it, then I'm going to assume all of you guys did it. So they're all looking at her, and they're all, like, not breaking their silence. And Nick is just like, what? Like, I'm going to get in trouble for this? I didn't even do anything. I just sat there. And, so eventually the principal realized, kind of, like, looked around and kind of came to a conclusion that they could actually figure out who did what. And they said, okay, well, lucky for you guys, we have a breathalyzer test on tap here. So, we'll figure out pretty quickly who did it or not. And sure enough, they had, like, the police guy or the school officer or whatever go around, administer the breathalyzer, however that worked, right? Got a reading on all of them. And, sure enough, every single one of them, besides Nick and his friend, because his friend also said, I'm good, every single one of them besides those two got, like, a reading that was higher than whatever the average is, or not the average, but the standard, below standard, or error, or whatever it is, right? And, so Nick and his friend were let go with a warning saying, look, if we see you guys, like, or even around, like, people doing this again, it's going to be a little bit of a different situation, but for now you can go. So Nick leaves with his friend, and his friend's like, Nick, I'm so sorry I got you into that. Like, look, they're good kids, but sometimes they do stupid stuff like that in school, and, it could have gotten us all in trouble, so I'm sorry about that. And Nick's like, that's fine, man. Like, it's all good. Don't worry about it. And, Nick and this guy actually continued to be friends, but Nick did not hang out with him a lot at lunch or when he was hanging out with these other friends. I also think because these other friends weren't a huge fan of Nick either, because he tried to, like, say, I didn't do it right away, which is the thing you're supposed to be doing. It's not like Nick had any allegiance to these people who he didn't know, you know what I mean? Anyways, we're going to call a subscriber who submitted the next story a Christian, and this is a pretty hilarious story. And I don't know if Christian's not necessarily in the right here, but it is still a funny story that I know you guys will enjoy either way, so let's jump into it. So we're going to call the subscriber who submitted the story Christian, and Christian was a senior at high school. And he decided that he was going to be an entrepreneur. He was going to make some money. He was going to, start his own little business of selling fake grass to kids. And when I say fake to kids, meaning like freshmen, right? And okay, so I don't actually mean grass like lawn clippings. I think you guys can get a sense of what I mean by grass. I have to speak around these words, or I just do out of good YouTube. It's a good idea because their AI is getting pretty good. I don't want them to flag the video. But anyways, right, so yeah, Christian is deciding that he's going to sell fake grass to these kids. Basically what he does is he goes to his local, like, Pottery Barn type shop, or Michael's Crafts or whatever type shop. And he goes to the section where they sell moss. I don't know if you guys know this, but you can buy, like, real dried moss or whatever, and if you want to make, like, a fake little, like, forest or whatever in arts and crafts or something like that. But Christian had the genius idea that he was going to buy it for, like, $10 a bag and then resell it for, like, $200. Like, obviously parsing the things up and selling it to freshmen who didn't know any better and would totally pay way too much for it. And look, I don't endorse this. Just because I'm telling the story does not mean I endorse it, and I need to make that super clear. However, this story is really funny, so I'm just going to tell it, even if I don't endorse it, okay? Just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger, guys. But anyways, right, so sure enough, Christian, is like, kind of like word gets out, they're like, to the freshmen, like, oh, Christian's the guy to go to or whatever. And sure enough, this like group of freshman guys come up. They're like, hey man, I heard you are selling some, and Christian's like, yeah, you want some grass? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll pay anything. And Christian's like, okay. He's like, okay, this stuff's really good though, so I'm gonna have to charge you a lot. Charges them like $70 for a bag, and they're like, oh man, thank you so much. Literally just a bag of Michael's Arts and Crafts moss. But they don't know. They don't know. He could have given them like, I don't know, a bag of dirt and been like, it's really special. It's like, it's an exotic kind, dude. Like, trust me. So yeah, the freshmen then say, dude, we're actually going to smoke it right now. It's going to be so crazy, dude. We'll come back in 20 minutes. We'll show you how insane we are. And Christian's like, in his head, he's like, oh, am I going to get, like, outed? Like, are they going to realize it's fake when they smoke the moss and nothing happens? Sure enough, these kids come back in 20 minutes. And Christian sees them. And they're, like, all stumbling around. They're like, oh, my God, bro. I'm on a different planet right now. Where are you? Where are you, bro? And they're, like, one of them's just, like, this laughing uncontrollably. And Christian, for a second, is like, did I give them my actual stuff? Like, wait a minute. Pause. Whoa. And then Christian checks again. He's like, kind of crunches it up, sniffs it a little bit, being like, no, this is moss. This is the moss I bought. So basically, these kids burned up some moss you can buy at an arts and crafts store, like inhaled some of the fumes, which probably is kind of toxic, inhaled some of that stuff, and then proceeded to pretend, basically, like they were on the craziest trip of their life. Let me just say, man, placebo is a crazy thing. I mean, sometimes they found that, like, just giving someone a pill that has nothing in it and saying that it'll make you feel better will make them feel better because they believe. The power of belief is insane. That's all I'm trying to say. Christian didn't decide to burst their bubble. In fact, he was their number one supplier of Michael's Arts and Crafts moss. They thought was something else, right? At the end of the day, they had a good time. They weren't doing anything technically illegal, and Christian got paid. So can I really blame the guy? Comment moss down below if you made it this far into the video, and peace. Click on the video on screen right now. I know you'll enjoy it. Just click.